Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Ripple Effect podcast, where we are having conversations. I'm Caroline Pearce. I am a coach and leadership impact partner. And so I work generally with leaders, but with all sorts of people who are trying to make more impact on the world. And this conversation is with Simon Dixon. Simon is from Climate Action Leeds, and the conversation talks about climate, it talks about climate action, it talks about politics, it talks about how those interrelate. And the big thing for me, because it was a conversation with Simon when I was first planning this podcast earlier in the year. It was going to have a very different focus, and then talking to Simon, I realised there's so much more nuance in the conversation that I had been intending to investigate, and just went, oh, there's a really tricky conversation in there. And I think we mention it in our kind of in this episode, but I think it's just useful to notice that was the inspiration to then go, oh, here, this is where I can be really useful. I can hold conversations with people about difficult conversations, and hopefully you'll learn something from Simon. He's a brilliant speaker. He knows so much. I find him really, really interesting. I hope that you do too. And hopefully you get some hints and tips that will make your life better. So thank you so much for listening. Enjoy. Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's just get straight into it. And how do you describe you, please?
Great, thanks for having me, inviting me on. So I'm Simon Dixon. I guess I describe myself as working in the kind of environmental justice space. Tend to consider myself an organizer. I've worked in communications. Right now I work in kind of admin and logistics, kind of project management. So those are kind of roles and responsibilities of what I do. But yeah, I guess I work around environmental climate topics, but increasingly I work around social justice, inequality, and trying to marry up those two areas and ensure that we're not being exclusionary, sort of elitist when we try to tackle environmental issues. And actually, we're very much kind of focusing on trying to help the people that are most in need in society, and not sort of starting at the other end of the spectrum for obvious reasons.
Well, you say for obvious reasons, but so I think it's relevant to say at this point that the idea of focusing these conversations, this what I now see as like a whole inquiry about having difficult conversations, actually started when I thought I was going to be doing a podcast that was much more about sustainability, and then I came to chat to you, and we had a conversation about how I talk about sustainability and how you talk about it, and realized that they're very, very different, and that some of the things that you told me about what I was saying was really eye-opening, because I'm in very different kind of echo chambers and so for me, in terms of like, I'm very familiar with wording around making the world a better place and quite ambitious terminology, and that I find that motivating, and a lot of the people that I know find that, like, that's what's inspiring, like, we can fix this if we all do this together. And that seemed to really like, there was quite a lot of friction with those words and then what you do. And I found that just that, yeah, I want to learn more about, like, difficult conversations, but how you, because yeah, like what you just said there, we have to, the social justice has to match with equality and inequality, and it has to be about helping the people who need the most. And so I suppose, so yeah, when you've just said for obvious reasons, I'm like, no, okay, like spell it out, like I'm an alien, like I'm a politician that needs teaching, like what are the reasons? Why do we, what's the language that's problematic? What's the language that's useful? How do we bridge that? How do we ask the tricky stuff?
Excellent. And I guess I'd almost sort of caveat sort of, you know, my experience and sort of expertise in this is partly comes from working at the University of Leeds. I worked with Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission and the Priestley Climate Centre, and I was in communications roles there. So I did about 4 years of working sort of as a climate communications officer, and that was a lot about kind of communicating climate research. And so I spent a lot of that time kind of doing, yeah, sort of communicating about the environment in what I would term a sort of fairly traditional way, and sort of appealing to people's sort of environmental consciousness and sort of to those feelings. But over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, I've been working for Climate Action Leeds, which is much more a community project. It's about helping people across the city on the ground to do projects that they're interested in. And we've seen a real range of projects. They're much more practical and they're much more about improving the lives of the people in those places. And they are tied to sort of environmental outcomes, but they often actually foreground the social outcomes, and that's kind of, yeah, what we've seen has been more successful is focusing on the social improvements that need to be made, and having the environmental as the kind of secondary benefit, if you like. So yeah, so I guess over easily the last sort of 4 or 5 years of working in this kind of space, I've just come to the realization that I guess it's where sort of it's where politics comes in. I think where politics ties into to creating positive environmental change, which is what we're aiming for. And I think, we're talking at like just after the weekend where we've seen over 100,000 people on the streets of London under a kind of protest known as Unite the Kingdom. And I think that the sentiment of people going to that kind of protest is basically unhappiness about the social situation and the kind of the broad story and direction of the country. And I think if there was over 100,000 people there, and they represent even more people that aren't necessarily willing to travel or to go to an event like that. And I think the kind of traditional way of talking about saving the planet doesn't get, it is not the right framing for those kind of people. And I think a big part of the reason for that is about kind of social security, how much money people have got, how secure they feel in terms of their jobs, their houses, their livelihoods. So as I said, what I was talking about before is, and the kind of conclusion I've come to is that we really need to look. Firstly, we know that there's a massive problem around climate change, but there are other massive problems in the UK and around the world, and And for many people, those problems are much higher on their list of kind of daily concerns. So if you come to them to say, oh, you know, do you want to do this to your house to save the world, to save the planet? You're just turning people off, because, you know, what they, if you first said, you know, what do you need? You know, how can we help you? Chances are they're not going to say, I'm worried about climate change and therefore I want help to insulate my house, or to you know, to remove gas as my heat source. It's much more likely that they're going to talk to you about you know, not being able to find a job, or not being paid enough in the work that they're doing. Yeah, it's much more likely that they're going to have much more immediate concerns that, as I say, when I was talking about like elitist or exclusionary, talking about these kind of bigger, longer term issues, I think, yeah. So that's why I think it's important to get the framing right, and to you know, to, in terms of popularity of tackling the climate crisis. You know, we need a public mandate and a political mandate to continue investing money in tackling the climate crisis. So people need to sort of see and feel that those measures are going to help them in the short term as well as in the long term.
See, thank you. And see, it makes so much sense when you say it. And also, I know when you're talking about paying the bills, that feels so much like that to me, that lands so much less than than we have to save the world. Like, and so, like, I hear what you're saying, but I also need to learn it. And I need to, and I'm absolutely not saying that I'm in a position to like to pay everyone's bills, like, or to like, sometimes I'm struggling to pay my bills. Like, it just feels from the perspective that I'm in that is a less present thing, and so just acknowledging and starting to get to like really understand on a deeper level where like what these different opinions are. I think that it's less useful to examine how we've got to there, because loads of people are doing that, and we can like it, but it's really easy for me, it would be really easy for me to make this a like an easier conversation, to go, oh yes, of course, people's bills. But actually, I know that when you said that, when you were saying about changing my heat source to save the world, that felt much more like a call to action, and acknowledging that from that conversation, that's what I'm going to take away, because somebody, but that actually I really, really want to understand that other people are going to take a different thing away from that same conversation. And in this world of where there's so much, everyone's getting different messages, and in reality, we're not all responding differently to the same messages. We're responding differently to very different messages. We can also respond differently to the same messages, and so it's so complicated when you really try to understand it. So that's why I really want to learn. And like, what are the messages that you use that, I suppose, help to make connection with people who go to a Unite the Kingdom protest?
So yeah, I guess I think you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, the way that people consume information and receive messaging is totally different. You know, has become so much more targeted now, and so, you know, we've seen it in the likes of different sort of big campaign moments where it's like micro targeting. You know, different people on Facebook getting different sort of ads and messaging to try and bring them to the same conclusion. So I think I agree with what you were saying there about if there's an event advertised, if it's talking about the environment, the climate, saving the world, that may well appeal to me stronger than if it uses a different framing. And that's certainly true in the past, although because I'm one of those event organizers, I'm one of the ones now shifting the messaging, and so that obviously has an impact as well. So I think you're definitely right that I think the key thing is that we have this kind of broad mission of make the UK more sustainable, and make Leeds more sustainable in our case, and that can be done there are a wide range of sort of things that are required to make that happen. A wide range of people need to be involved in that, and therefore we need a wide range of messaging to get those people involved and to get them interested. So everyone has different motivations and drivers, and political allegiances. So but I guess the challenging moment we're in now, as compared to like 2 or 3 years ago, is that we've got the sort of, what do we call it? I think it was maybe like political consensus that climate change was a problem and needed to be a high priority, has broken down in the last couple of years in the UK, which is quite scary for those of us who are concerned about those issues. So that's what we're essentially trying to combat now, is how to make it a consensus again. But yeah, so in terms of the different messages we use, I guess one of the best, to sort of give the broader context. So the Climate Action Leeds project that I work for, one of the things we've done is to set up a community venue in Leeds city centre, as you know, which is where we met, which we call Imagine Leeds, and it's similar to other community venues or community centres in the sense that people from Leeds can come to that venue, and if they're willing to, or if their interests align with the kind of purpose of the space, which is around the environment and social justice, then they can use that space, they can use that resource for events, for meetings, for exhibitions and displays, and even for co-working as well. And so what's been really interesting at kind of managing and setting that venue up and then running it, is that we've had a really wide range of groups, organizations, and people use that space. And I guess the sort of lesson here is that a big part of to answer your question, a big part of what we've done has been to offer something out as a resource and say we want to focus on these topics, and then essentially wait to see what comes back. So the events and meetings that happen at our venue, pretty much on a daily basis, are essentially like community-led, community-generated, and that means that it's not like me and a couple of colleagues have to sit away and think, right, what are the messages, what are the topics, how are we going to get people interested in the environment and social justice, which is a very sort of, I guess, top-down approach, and a sort of more of a kind of expert-led approach. We're essentially doing the opposite. Most of the time we're doing the opposite of that. We're saying to people, these are topics that we'd like to focus on in this venue. What are you interested in? And so what does that then look like? We're basically supporting a lot of those groups that are mainly volunteers, or like very small charities. So there's a lot of focus around retrofit, around community energy. There's a lot of focus around food and nature, actually. and there's a lot of focus around social justice and political issues. So, one of those examples would be Palestine. We have a lot of groups that use a space that are organising around those topics. And I think what's been interesting, we've now run the space in 2 different venues, and we're getting close to the sort of 2-year mark of experience of running Imagine Leeds. I think what I've sort of come to realize recently is that the people that benefit the most from Imagine Leeds are the people that are kind of most marginalized in society, and they're the people that don't necessarily feel as welcome at other venues around the city. And so we're really providing a sort of really important resource for those kind of groups and people, because there is no alternative. There is no good other option. So we've seen a decline in sort of community and public spaces, and we're trying to combat that. And kind of through that approach that we've done, we've managed to support some of those groups that actually have a lot to teach us about the right messaging to take. So, yeah.
So I'm finding that really inspiring. Like, also, there's a lot of work there that if you're being a base for everybody who feels marginalized from other spaces, that is, it's number one, so valuable. And I don't know, what are they teaching you at the moment? What questions are they bringing to, like, not necessarily questions that they're bringing for you to answer, but what questions are they carrying, or what are they, what can we learn from what you know?
Yeah, so I think a big part of what we've learned is the power of community organizing, the energy and enthusiasm that's there. We've seen over time an evolution of the groups and organizations that use our space. So particularly at the more sort of direct action protest sort of end of the spectrum, I think there's a sort of a faster turnover of those groups.
As in, they're kind of growing, acting, and then burning out?
Not necessarily, possibly burning, but yes, what you've described, whether burning out or sort of, just rebranding into or changing focus. So
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of campaign groups that use the space, and they tend to be quite nimble and responsive to the political world that they're operating in. And again, that really is about messaging. So I guess, to put it into sort of more specific terms, there's groups like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion who have used Imagine Leeds in the past and aren't using it anymore. And they're not using it anymore. It's not because they have found another venue to go to, or because we've said we don't want you in the space anymore. It's because those people have kind of moved on to other groups, and those campaign groups are far less active, certainly in Leeds, but also across the country. But then we've got new campaign groups that are using the space now who I hadn't heard of 2 years ago when we first opened. And again, a lot of that is about, the messaging that starts with the name of the campaign, and the tactics change over time. But yeah, I guess the broader lesson that we've learned again is around this kind of big picture of we had this vision, and my colleague Andy Goldring has kind of led on trying to set up uh, this venue that can be a kind of headquarters for environmental social action in the city, because I guess for a few reasons, but primarily because we feel that the city of Leeds, like many other places, is going in the wrong direction, not in the right direction, both on the environment and on many social issues. And the institutions we currently have in the city are sort of presiding over that move in the wrong direction. So what we've been trying to do is to elevate the sort of civic voice and the civic groups in the city who are, working on those topics, to try and help them take more power almost in the city, so that they can talk to businesses and talk to the universities and the council and so on, to be able to help shape the direction of the city. So that's kind of been a big part of the reason for setting up a venue, is that we know there's lots and lots of people across the city who want to spend some of their own kind of volunteer time campaigning, organizing on these issues. But it's not very, a lot of that happens on Zoom these days. But there's not many places in the city of Leeds where a group can go without feeling like they need to spend a lot of money, just to be able to hang out in a venue. And yeah, there's certainly not many venues that are kind of have a sort of purposeful and kind of want to support their users to focus on certain topics. So that's why we've set up Imagine Leeds, and we're 2 years in. Our initial funding comes to an end in about 2 weeks' time, but we've recently managed to sort of secure an extension both for the premises we're in and for our funding, so that we can keep this going. And the reason we're doing that is because we've seen such high demand for our space and sort of high levels of engagement with the work that's going on there. So yeah, I guess one of the broader lessons that we've learned is there's incredible power in sort of community groups and the third sector, but it needs supporting. It's the sort of the poorest partner in terms of the makeup of the city. And so we badly need venues and resources to enable those groups to have make their voices heard, and thus be able to help the bigger organizations in the city to get their messaging right, and to know how people feel, and to have that dialogue.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much evidence about, like, what you're saying is anecdotal, but like there is so much kind of also scientific evidence that the benefit of connecting in person, and like we tend, like it's easy to dismiss the importance of that because Zoom exists and social media exists and people can connect, but actually being able to meet in person means that there's a quality to the conversation, and there's so much extra kind of connection that happens around that. And I was in a workshop yesterday where they were restating that thing that in communication 7% is the words, and then something like 38% is the body language, but actually more than 50% is other, like the tone and the pitch and the ums and the pace and the like, that sort of stuff, that a lot of the detail of that is lost when you're not in person with people, and you can't just like connect and make eye contact. There's so much benefit in being in person with people that helps you bridge, because it's easy to find divides when you're just looking at the words, and sometimes easy to pass over connections where if you're in person it's much easier to go, oh yeah, we disagree on this, but actually she's a great egg, and like, and then build those connections. And the more we're in practice building connections with all sorts of people, then it helps us practice to get over when we disagree, and to work out, just to keep on practicing that, I suppose. So yeah, being in person with people that we definitely already share opinions in common with, or hobbies or interests in common with, and will help us be in person. And what you're doing, just listening to all of those groups that are gathering and using the space, and then being kind of because we can't all go out and meet all of the people, but what you're doing is helping to bridge the messaging thing, and just help call out when bigger organizations that are trying to do good accidentally do something terrible. And as long as then the people in those organizations are open to learning that actually listening to all of the people is how we make a difference, and remembering how to listen. You're nodding. I feel, does that, like, what, have I got anything wrong there?
No, I think that's a really good summary. And I guess in terms of those kind of bigger organizations in the city, a lot of our work at Imagine Leeds has been about connecting the sort of some of the active campaign groups and charities in the city with some of those bigger organizations. So we're acting as this kind of sort of gateway or facilitator, or a sort of really important hub in the network. So we've had businesses come and use the space, and just like have a meet and greet, have presentations from 3 or 4 campaign groups, just to help them like get out of their bubble. We do events with Leeds City Council where we're helping them to consult with some of so we know that we don't represent the entire city, but we represent a pretty broad range of groups, organizations, kind of interest areas. So yeah, and like you say, it's just really vital that there's a space where people can come together from groups that wouldn't necessarily even know about each other, let alone work together, and then have the chance to potentially collaborate, or have discussions and debates to see where they agree and disagree. We've done a few events with some of the MPs in Leeds, where again we've, rather than an MP just sort of not rather, but as well as MPs doing their own kind of constituency surgeries where people come to them with sort of individual issues, they've essentially come to Imagine Leeds and done this kind of wider sort of surgery on environmental and social topics. And we've brought 10 different groups together on a single day to say, right, these are our views across these topics. So those kind of events are quite good representations of again a bit around this kind of messaging story, that politicians, MPs generally are very good listeners, because they need to know what is public opinion, and therefore where should I sort of land on certain topics, and Imagine Leeds is a place where MPs can come, businesses can come, the council can come, ordinary citizens can come to hear those views across a wide range of topics. And actually we've got an event later today, which is our sort of most regular event at the moment at Imagine Leeds, which is just called Green Drinks Leeds. And it's a sort of a social meetup, social gathering. Lots of different people come from a variety of parts of the city and different groups. And most of the time it's just kind of informal kind of networking and chatting over drinks and a bit of food. But we always have a guest speaker. And the topics we've covered have varied from sort of the importance of art in activism and campaigning. We've had topics, the most recent one was looking at the sort of the international connections that people in Leeds have, the climate and environmental impacts that are being felt around the world. And today we're looking at the sadly very sort of prescient topic of militarism and climate change in the kind of this world of war that we're living in at the moment. So really kind of that's just a flavor of some of the topics that are represented by different groups and people that use the space. So it's a good way of having those monthly events is a good way to showcase what topics are being looked at by different people using Imagine Leeds, and a good way that people can regularly start to meet others and to build those social interactions.
And I'm really hearing that because I know about Green Drinks Leeds and haven't been, but I hadn't engaged my brain, like I hadn't even noticed that there was a keynote speaker. And so personally, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes much more sense. Like, I don't know, it didn't make no sense before, but yeah, I mean, I can't go today, but yeah, that's such a brilliant way of doing it. So I will be there next time.
Right.
So in terms of people in Leeds can come to Imagine Leeds, and you might have something more specific, but just in general, what advice would, like, is there one thing or a couple of things that you just wish everybody across opinions, across politics, across that just everybody knew more about, could do, was more open to? Like, what's something really simple or massive that you just wish you could, like, if you had a magic wand, what's the one thing that we would do differently?
I guess I don't have a magic wand, so I don't often I don't often think of what would I try and do overnight. I guess I spoke about this a bit at an event I was at in Leeds over summer, and I guess the sort of the big picture, I guess, sort of issue that I'm really interested in and trying to combat, I think actually relates very closely to the sort of the way that society has sort of turned people both into like consumers, but also into very sort of individualized people and units. And I think what that means is that people are sort of becoming a bit less trusting, or certainly less willing to engage with neighbours, strangers, people that kind of they wouldn't typically meet or interact with. And I think that leads, what that's led to is the kind of political landscape we're living in, which is getting more and more extreme, so that people are being pulled, and the effects of like social media kind of rabbit holes as helps a lot with causing this problem as well, which is people getting more and more extreme in their views, and less people being in this kind of middle space of being able to understand people's views in different areas, but not necessarily being on one side or the other. So for me, one of the ways to combat that is through venues like Imagine Leeds and events that are sort of designed to bring people together from different viewpoints. So I often see events that are like, I don't know, big community like meals and that kind of thing, like giant tables in parks where it's just about bringing people together. And I think there's been a sort of real decline in community, that kind of community organizing, community spirit, sort of neighborliness. which I think then has this real knock-on impact when it's like, okay, well, who should we vote for? And suddenly, people aren't even speaking to each other. So you get these real extremities in view. So yeah, for me, I guess I'm still figuring out the ways to combat these problems. But to me, one of the solutions is trying to bring people together more regularly and in more places around a city, to open up these dialogue. And I guess this podcast itself is a little representation of why that's needed and how you can do that. So yeah, I think that's what's required. And we talked about the march on Saturday in London. Where are the spaces now for people to discuss those issues in a civilized way in places across the country? In reality, what we're much more likely to get is just extreme political rhetoric and a sort of social media sort of hot takes on that march, whether it's people that went to it and are supportive of it, or people that are very dismissive of it and think it was madness. So yeah, that's where I'm at, really.
Okay, I'm gonna say, so someone that I know did a reel the other day that just reminded us that while 100, maybe 150,000 people met in the United Kingdom protest, that actually earlier in the summer 300,000 people went on the trans rights protest, but it just didn't get the same level of coverage. So that actually lots of people are activated around the things that they care about, and I think that's where I come in, going like, actually there's a lot of energy, and energy can be positive and it can be negative, and surely, but so I felt like I just wanted to say that because the other had been mentioned, but the message that I've heard is actually the small action that I can do that might have the biggest impact is just engaging my brain on connecting with my neighbours, and or attending things in my community or communities that will enable me to meet people that I wouldn't otherwise meet. And I can do that, and I think most people can choose to just be a little bit more proactive with their immediate neighbours.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, thank you so much, Simon. Thank you. Yeah, like I've said before, I think that I need to talk to you more. And I want more people to hear what you've got to say, because I just think it's so useful, and the work that you're doing is so important, but also fun. Like, you're connecting with loads of people and having loads of conversations, and that in itself is lovely.
Yeah, and again, that's just as important, isn't it? What's people need, what do they say? There's a great phrase that I've no idea how it goes about, we need to be having more fun than our opposition, basically. And I think that's really true as well. I've mentioned various wars and the climate crisis and social inequality. Like these are all really serious and often scary issues, but we're all people as well, and so you can do an event like we've got this evening that is going to be enjoyable for people. It will have its moments of real kind of heartache when we're looking at these topics, but the human connection is what brings people together to talk about these difficult topics. And if you don't offer something positive, then people probably aren't going to come to your event or come to your venue or want to listen to your podcast. So
Yeah, or like, smile at your neighbour. Like, it's yeah. Okay, thank you. If
thank you.
they want to know more about you, where can they find you?
So we're kind of at a transition point, so things may change, but at the moment, our main website is climateactionleeds.org.uk, and that's where all of our events, Green Drinks Leeds, as well as lots of others. We're doing an event next week around community data and community ownership of information and knowledge. But yeah, there's plenty coming up. So that's the best website. And yeah, Climate Action Leeds on Instagram and Facebook as well, and TikTok. So yeah, and yeah, it's just I look forward to kind of hearing the rest of your series as well, because I think yeah, we're in a situation where we need to continually improve and adapt our messaging and get feedback on it. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on our inquiry into difficult, tricky and brave conversations. Please like and subscribe and join the conversation over at theripl.substack.com. That's THERIPL.substack.com.